Hello and welcome back to the caves, everybody. Welcome back to Hoxies, where today we're going to be taking a look at 5 very strong scout beginner builds. So this is going to be no overclock builds for this, but we are going to be talking about the mods and a primary and a secondary combination. Let's go over the pros and cons for scout first, then we'll actually get into the builds themselves. For the general pros of playing scout, scout has really high mobility, which is fantastic. You can move around the cave by far the easiest out of any of the classes, with some cave gen exceptions. Sometimes somebody like Driller can move around a little bit easier, but either way, Scout can get to any place the fastest. They have pretty high single target damage too. That's another really good bonus for Scout. You can take down big things pretty fast, and they also have the ability to light up the caves thanks to their flare gun. That helps out a lot. I know a lot of people that really dislike playing without a Scout, which can be totally understandable, especially if you're using something like a TV screen, you're playing this on console, where maybe you might get glares on it too. That might be worse. If you're using, let's say, like a high-end monitor, that might not be such a big deal. I don't find it to be that big of a deal. My monitor's not high-end by any means, but it's still pretty decent. For the general cons of Scout, though, they do tend to have low overall ammo. Scout can run through bullets pretty fast. Them and Inji tend to run out of ammo pretty quick. Gunner and Driller tend to have a bit more bullets. They also can kind of struggle against crowds. Depending on what weapons you're using and what equipment you're using, you may find yourself going through bullets even faster because you do have to take out crowds of grunts. And even though Scout can kill grunts really quick, it may not be worth it overall in terms of the amount of ammo that you end up using. So let's move on to the builds now. Our very first build is going to be mostly like the beginner build, going with the GK2 assault rifle and the boomstick as our primary and secondary weapon. For the GK2 assault rifle, I have it built like this. For this, I'm going to be using the site karl.gg, so if you would like to use this site, feel free to. It shows you all the numbers that you get out of this, which is really awesome, and I highly recommend the site. For the GK2 and tier 1, I'm running with the faster reload speed. This one's really nice. It makes it so you can constantly stay in the fight with the GK2, has that 1.3 second reload speed, super fast. Tier 2, I'm going with more damage. This one or the ammo are both really good for the GK2, it just depends on what you want. This lets you have more burst damage, and I guess more sustained damage too, but you're going to run out of ammo faster than if you would have went with more ammo. So if you're on a particular long mission, or you find yourself running out of bullets quickly, you could go with the ammunition in tier 2. Tier 3, I'm going to the larger magazine. This one's your choice though. Recoil reduction is really nice too if you find that the GK2 bounces around a lot. If you're fine with the base recoil, then I like going with the larger magazine so that you can hold those 10 more rounds in it. Then I've got weak spot damage in tier 4. Both these ones are really good too. This one just makes it so you can do a little bit more damage if you're hitting things in the weak spot, so you can kill big things a little bit quicker, you can kill grunts a little bit faster. Armor breaking's kind of nice for big enemies though too, like the guards, so you can rip through their armor a little bit faster than you otherwise would. And then in tier 5, I'm going with a faster rate of fire, so we can get more damage per second. All of them are pretty good in tier 5 though. If you don't like that, you want to go with like the stun, you can pick that too. This is just going to be a general weapon that's kind of good at everything. You're going to be using this at close, medium, and long range, and it works really well against everything. It doesn't really struggle against anything so long as you actually have bullets. For the secondary weapon, we are using the jury-rigged boomstick, which is your first secondary weapon, and this one is a generally close-range shotgun, but don't only think that it's at close range. Sometimes the boomstick can be surprisingly accurate at longer ranges, so don't be afraid to be shooting at things at really long range with the boomstick, because sometimes you'll just get a really tight spread pattern, and you'll be able to one-shot things from across the cave. It's not super consistent, but it does sometimes happen. For the build, I'm running with the boomstick. In tier 1, I've got more ammo. We don't really need more damage with the boomstick. It already does a lot of damage, both against single targets and against big enemies. You could go with damage if you'd like to deal even more damage towards large things like Praetorians, but if you're okay with that, then more ammo is really nice. Tier 2, both these are really good if you want faster rate of fire or if you want a faster reload. I'm going with the faster reload, and the faster reload does actually affect the boomstick now better than it used to, because it's kind of been fixed where it wasn't just tied to your rate of fire, so the rate of fire was just generally better with this one. The reload speed is actually really nice now. In tier 3, I'm going with more pellets. This is so that I can do even more damage towards big enemies. It's not really needed against small enemies because the boomstick on any difficulty can already one-shot grunts regardless. The boomstick also has a cone blast in front of it too, so kind of keep that in mind. So long as you're standing within 5 meters of enemies, you will deal extra damage to everything in front of you because of that shockwave that comes out of the boomstick. In tier 4, I'm going with the blow-through rounds. This makes it so I can punch through multiple enemies, potentially up to 3 enemies. It makes it so the boomstick's actually pretty good against crowds. And that's mostly what I'm going to be using this for, or against big targets when I get up close to them, because Scout can move around really fast thanks to their grapple hook. So this just helps against bigger enemies, and it helps against smaller enemies too. And then in tier 5, it's kind of your choice as to whatever one you would like to pick. I'm going to be picking the white phosphorus shells though, so that I can have fire damage on top of my shotgun. This will just get me more damage overall against almost anything besides something like dreadnoughts where they are immune to being lit on fire. But against basically everything else, I'm just going to get more damage out of this, so that's pretty nice. This is a really well-rounded loadout that can kind of deal with just about everything. Let's move on to our second loadout, which is a little bit more specialized, but also pretty good at dealing with just about anything. That is using the M1000 Classic as our primary weapon, and the Zukovs as our secondary weapon. So the M1000 Classic is the battle rifle of Deep Rock, and it is a very strong weapon. It's really good. It can already one-shot headshot grunts on any difficulty. You don't need any sort of mods for it. And if you take the armor breaking in tier 2, it can one-shot focus shot grunts on any difficulty too. That is a really, really nice breakpoint to hit for the M1000. This is the way that I'm going to be building my M1000. For tier 1, I'm going with extra ammo. You don't really need more damage unless you want to hit big things harder, and more ammo is pretty nice with this weapon because it can run through pretty quick, so I would usually just recommend taking that. In tier 2, I'm going with the armor breaking. This is so that I can do those focus shots and punch through grunts on any difficulty. Really, really nice to have, and just makes it so even my regular shots are still pretty good against most things. In tier 3, I'm going with the larger magazine capacity. This makes it so we go from holding 8 rounds in the gun up to holding 14 rounds in the gun. That's pretty nice too. I don't have to reload as often, and the reload on the M1000 is a little bit slow, but you can reload cancel it, and you can actually make it pretty fast. When you're in the middle of the reload, as soon as you see the ammo go into the gun, you can use your pickaxe, and then you'll reset this, so it's faster than just waiting for the full reload animation. In tier 4, I'm going with the blow-through rounds. This makes it so I can punch through up to 3 enemies, and if I'm using focus shots and I have this armor breaking on there, if I punch through 3 grunts, no matter where I hit them, it's going to kill them on any difficulty, so that's super nice with this weapon. Although the weak spot damage is pretty good too if you want to deal more single target damage. And then in tier 5, it's really your choice. Pick whatever you'd like in tier 5. I'm going with the fast reload after kills. This just makes it so if I do kill something and I go to reload, I'm going to reload a little bit quicker. But if you like the fear or you like the stun, take either of those. They're both really good too. This makes so the M1000 kind of deals well against everything, does really well against crowds, does really well against single targets, and it has really long range by default, so I can hit basically anything in the cave. My secondary is going to be the Zukov submachine guns, and these I have built more for a general build too that kind of works well against anything at close to medium range. You're not going to be using the Zukovs at super long range, or at least I hope that you don't, because they're not the most accurate weapons at very long range. So in tier 1, I'm going with extra ammo just so that I can use this more often. The damage of the Zukovs generally isn't that amazing once you just go for that unless you want to have more DPS, but ammo makes it so I can just use this much longer. In tier 2, I'm going with the faster reload, but all of them in tier 2 are really good. Pick whichever one you'd like. Tier 3, I'm going with more accuracy. This does make it so the Zukovs aren't just stuck at close range. They are at least able to hit things at medium range pretty effectively. Tier 4, I'm going with even more ammo so that I can use this even more often. And then in tier 5, I'm going with the electricity damage, so that way if I'm running something like IFGs or if there's electricity on the team, then we can get even more damage towards the target. If you don't like that though, you could run get in, get out, and that just makes it so you have faster movement speed once you go to reload this weapon, which does help too, so that's pretty nice. The general way that I'm going to be using this loadout is Zukovs at very close range when enemies are getting right up next to me, and I can just keep backing up and spraying them into them, and then I'm going to be using the M1000 at anything at medium to longer ranges. This loadout's pretty nice too. It kind of does just about everything that you would want for Scout. Might eat through ammo a little bit quick for the M1000, but the Zukovs are kind of there to make up for that. For our third build, we're going to be using the Drak Plasma Carbine as our primary weapon, and we're going to be building this more for crowd control so that we can kind of use this against lots of crowds. The Drak is probably Scout's best option for dealing with lots of crowds of small things, especially swarmers and jellyfish, because you do get a lot of ammo for it. So in tier 1, I'm going with the reduced heat per shot. This makes it so my gun doesn't overheat as fast, so I can just use it more often. Tier 2, I'm going with more ammo, so I don't run out of ammo for killing crowds. This will be useful because our secondary is going to be the crossbow, and you don't get tons of shots for that. If you're going with something like the Zukovs, then maybe damage here could be really good though too. In tier 3, I'm going with the faster cooldown, so when I'm not shooting this, it's going to cool down a little bit quicker, which is really good. Makes it so I can have more uptime to actually be fighting things. Tier 4, all of these are pretty decent. The splash damage is really good if you have Swarmageddon. I would recommend that one, but I'm going to be saying electricity is generally going to be the better option because it does better against grunts. Electricity slows down enemies and deals damage over time so that we can get even more value out of our Drak overall, and it does make it so fighting big things is also pretty good. And then in tier 5, I'm going with the feedback loop. So once we start getting up to about 50% heat and higher, we start shooting faster, and that makes it so we can have even more DPS if things are getting right on top of us, which is pretty nice. You will have to kind of get used to that timing though, because you can overheat the Drak, and then when it's overheated, you can't use it. For the secondary weapon of this, we are going to be using the crossbow. And for this, I have it more set up for kind of crowd control. The crossbow is really good in terms of single target damage and the amount of utility that it gives us. The way I have the crossbow built, in tier 1, I have the pheromone bolts. The pheromone bolts are really, really good for the crossbow. You can shoot this into a big enemy and then all the little enemies swarm towards them and start attacking them. So this is just really nice to have, and arguably the strongest bolt in the game. I know a lot of people would argue it to be the strongest bolt in the game. In tier 2, I'm going with even more special bolts so that we have even more of these pheromone bolts so we can use it even more often. Works really well for crowds. All of them in tier 2 are pretty good though. Pick whichever one you like the most. Tier 3, I'm going with the faster reload. This also goes for faster swap speeds, so switching back and forth between the standard bolts and the unique bolts is a little bit quicker. I really like that. Makes it so there's less downtime, and the regular bolts are fantastic for picking off things at a distance. Like you can one-shot slashers, you can one-shot tri-jaws with this. It's really nice to have just the regular bolts one-hitting things like that. In tier 4, we're going with the movement speed. This makes it so when I kill something with the crossbow, I can move around faster. This can be really nice for actually like running and gunning, like Scout really likes to do, because if you hit something, then you can move even faster, use your grappling hook to get away and reposition, then switch back to your drac, or just keep shooting the crossbow at whatever is causing you issues at the moment. Then in tier 5, I'm going with the potent special bolts. This just makes it so that my bolts last even longer, so the pheromone duration is even longer than it already would be. So big enemies, I usually like to stick these into Praetorians or Oppressors, and then just have everything attack them. Well, I can either pick off the small things or continually attack the big thing in there too. Alright, moving on to our 4th build. We're going to be going with the GK2 once again, and we're going to be pairing this with the crossbow. So the GK2 this time around is going to be built more for spraying things at kind of medium to close range, and then we're going to be using the crossbow against bigger enemies. So the GK2 I've built for a full 2 build. In tier 1, I'm going with a faster rate of fire so we can get even more damage and damage per second out quicker. In tier 2, I'm going with more ammo. You could go with even more damage here if you would like, so that you can hit things even harder, but I do find that the ammo is kind of nice for this, so we're not running through ammo too fast. In tier 3, this one's really your choice. If you find that the gun is bouncing around too much because of the higher rate of fire, you might want to go with the recoil, but I do like going with the larger magazine so we don't run out that quick. In tier 4, I'm going with the armor breaking so we can shred through certain armored enemies a little bit faster. And then in tier 5, we are also going with faster rate of fire, so we can go from the standard 8 rate of fire up to 11 rate of fire. And this makes it so the GK2 can shred through things pretty fast, although you can run through ammo even faster with this because you are shooting way faster. So this is more of a run and gun play style for Scout. Then again, for a secondary weapon, we are going to be pairing this with the Bolt Shark crossbow. And for this, we're not actually going to be building it for pheromone bolts, although you could if you would like to. That would be perfectly fine for crowd control. We're going to be building it more for single target damage. This build is pretty good for something like a Dreadnought mission. So in tier 1, we're going with the Electro Bolts. Electro Bolts are pretty nice because if you hit something directly with it, it sticks in them and zaps them. And if you put 2 electric bolts onto an enemy, it actually arcs the electricity back and forth and slows them even further. And this works for things that aren't even affected by the electricity normally, like Dreadnoughts. So you can stick 2 of these into a Dreadnought and it just slows to a crawl where it cannot catch up to anybody. And it makes it really easy to just keep maneuvering around something like a Dreadnought and hitting it in the back. It's also really good for things like Oppressors or Praetorians for doing the exact same strategy, and it can be kind of useful for just setting up like an electric grid, a bug zapper that zaps all the smaller bugs too. That's super fun with the electricity bolts. In tier 2, I'm going with more ammo for regular bolts, although you could go with more electricity bolts or more damage here. All of them in tier 2 are really good. Most of the time I'm going to be saving the electric bolts for something really big, and I'm just going to be using the regular bolts to pick off kind of high value targets like tri-jaws or slashers. I'm not actually going to have the crossbow out a whole lot of the time. I'm mostly going to be using the GK2 with this. Tier 2, faster reload so I can get the faster swap speed too. Tier 4, the faster movement speed when I kill something, just in case I need that. And then Tier 5, the magnetic shaft, so if something is affected by the electricity, say I stick 2 electricity bolts into something, and then I fire the regular bolt, it's more likely to curve into that enemy. This is affected by all electricity though, so the magnetic shafts can be a little bit awkward in a team setting if you have like multiple engineers with stubbies or something where electricity can hit things closer to you and then your crossbow bolts will go right to them, more so than like a high value target you're trying to pick off. So that one can also be a little bit iffy if you don't like that. You could take something like the Fear in tier 5 if you want. That would also be a good option. Generally for this build, I'm going to be running around with the GK2, clear up all sorts of small stuff, and then I'm going to switch to the crossbow against big things. And then for our 5th and final build, before we talk about equipment and perks and stuff, is going to be the M1000 Classic with the boomstick. This one is a pretty straightforward build for kind of both of these weapons, where I'm going to be using the M1000 at long to medium range, and I'm going to be using the boomstick at close to medium range. M1000 is built very similar to our very first M1000, although I have changed it up slightly. So in tier 1, I'm going with extra ammo again, just so that we can have more of that. Tier 2, the armor breaking because it's super nice with the focus shots. Tier 3, more mag size, so 7 focus shots or 14 normal shots before I need to reload. Then the blow through rounds in tier 4, so I can punch through multiple enemies and clear up grunts really easy. And then in tier 5, the stun, so I can hit big things and stun them while I just kind of move around them, or I can stun them and then get close with the boomstick and do even more damage. Pretty straightforward, but a pretty strong build for the M1000. And then for the boomstick, I'm actually going to go with extra ammo for the boomstick, but aside from that, it's very similar to our other build for the boomstick. So in tier 1, I'm going with extra ammo so that we have more shotgun shots. Tier 2, either one is fine. I'm going with a faster reload, but if you want the rate of fire and more burst damage, you could go with that too. Tier 3, I'm going with even more ammo. This will take us all the way up to 46 shells in total before we completely run out with the boomstick, which that's really nice. This is going to be useful for crowd control at very close range. And then in tier 5, blow through rounds so I can hit multiple enemies, even more crowd control. You could take something like the shockwave here though too if you really like that. If you're really okay with using it at very close range, that can be super fun. Then in tier 5, white phosphorus shells, but you can pick whatever you'd like in tier 5. They're all really good. This is also one of my favorite loadouts without any sort of overclocks too. It's just a really strong loadout. Can go through ammo quick, but that's just kind of a theme of Scout where you can run through ammo fairly fast, but it can do a lot of damage. Let's talk about your equipment and the things that I would recommend. Let's go over the grappling hook first. For the grappling hook, the general build that I like to run with the grappling hook is this one right here. So in tier 1, I'm going with longer reach. In tier 2, I'm going with longer reach. This gives me 30 meters of effective reach, which is pretty nice, especially for very big caves. And I don't really find that the faster charge up in tier 1 is entirely necessary, but I know a lot of people do like it. So if you like that one, feel free to take it. If you don't, I like the reach. In tier 3, I would recommend the high velocity system. I don't really like the other one in tier 3. This just makes it so your grappling hook goes out faster. The other one makes it so you can move quicker after your grappling hook or after it flings you, but that makes it really hard to land on certain surfaces. So I don't really like that. I like the faster initial shot from it. And then in tier 4, I really like the momentum. This basically gives you dash whenever you use your grappling hook. Dash is arguably one of the best perks in the game, if not the best perk in the game. So having that just on your tool is really, really nice for the scout. This makes it so I can just use my grappling hook pretty often. A lot of the time I'll just pull this out, shoot away so that I can get somewhere, keep firing at whatever I was, and by the time I need to switch back to my grappling hook, it should be either charged or almost charged all the way up so I can use it again. The grappling hook is really, really nice to have, and you should be using it like all the time with Scout because there's just so many advantages you get with it. Up next is the flare gun. And the flare gun is kind of personal preference as to what you like to build with it. This is usually the way that I build my flare gun. So I'm going with increased duration flares overall and faster shooting flares. But if you like more magazine size, you can go with that too. Or if you like going with a combination of magazine size and with duration, you can do that as well. You technically do get the most out of your flares if you go with 1 duration and 1 ammunition. But I just find myself taking the duration just because I can set them up and not worry about the flares for a very long time. We're usually not in an area long enough for the duration to really matter, unless it's like a big egg hunt mission to where it's just one giant room. Then we also have the suit of the scout, and I have this built the same way that I usually build my suit. So in tier 1, I'm going with a bigger mineral bag. This lets me have 5 more capacity. You could go with the other options in tier 1 though too. They're both pretty decent. Tier 2, I'm going with more health. More health makes it so you're going to survive longer. I like this more than the more shields. It also stacks with other health perks too, so it just makes it so you're less likely to die faster, whereas the shield duration doesn't really help you that much on the higher difficulties because something like a slasher is going to punch through your shield and hit your health regardless. If you have more health, then you can survive longer than you otherwise would. In tier 3, we pick our only option, which is fall damage reduction for Scout, which is really nice. Fall damage is the most common way that dwarfs die in Deep Rock, so taking less fall damage from that is pretty nice, and this does stack with something like tunnel rats, so you can take even less damage. It also stacks with Gunner's zipline if they are running disconnection protection on it too. So if you have all of those, then Scout's probably not going to die from fall damage anytime soon. And then in tier 4, I would highly recommend that you take Breathing Room. Breathing Room, I think, is the best option in tier 4. The other 2 options really aren't that great. Breaking and dealing damage rarely matters unless it's against like Swarmers. And the one that it breaks and it's supposed to stun enemies doesn't. It just electrocutes enemies, so it deals damage over time to them, which just isn't that good either. Breathing Room makes it so when you get picked up, you have an additional 3 seconds on top of your already existing 3 seconds, so you get 6 seconds of duration whenever you're picked up so that you can't go down at all. That is really, really good because that allows you to pick up another dwarf within that amount of time, and it also allows you to get a resupply within that amount of time too, so, assuming that they're close. You can also just get more health this way if you go for red sugar, or if you have vampire. It's super useful, and I'd recommend it even in solo. Then we have our pickaxe, and for pickaxe, I would recommend that you upgrade this right away. The power attack is really nice to have. Always take that. And then for me personally, I go with better weight balance, so I have faster pickaxe attacks. But you can go with the bigger AoE or the more damage on the power attacks. Either one is good. Just pick whichever one you'd like. But I would recommend that you at least get the power attack for the pickaxe and probably grab one of the other options in tier 2 for it as well, because it is really, really nice, and a lot of the time you will have situations where just using your pickaxe will save you a lot of bullets throughout the game. Let's talk about grenades next for Scout. You have 4 different grenades that you can pick as Scout. Your very first one is called the IFGs. These ones are pretty cool. These ones you get 6 of. You can toss these out. They don't do any sort of friendly fire damage, and once they hit, they put up a big radius that will slow everything that walks into it. At least that's an enemy. It won't affect allies whatsoever. But if enemies walk through this, then they get slowed, as well as they take increased damage from all sources, which make it so that these deal tons of damage towards big enemies. They're really good for throwing at choke points, especially if you have something like a dreadnought. Then everybody can focus fire them and deal more damage, or if you have like a detonator, everybody can focus them and deal more damage. This is just to amp up your damage even higher, and it works really well in combination with something like your zukovs, which get even more damage on top of this. Scout's second grenade is the cryo grenades. These ones you get 4 of. You toss these out and then they detonate. So these just spread ice to everything. You can freeze a lot of things really fast. Sometimes you'll need 2 of these grenades to freeze certain larger enemies, but against regular, smaller enemies, you can just throw out 1 and freeze an entire group. If you throw this into a Mac Terra Plague, you'll kill them basically instantly, because any flying enemy that gets frozen dies instantly. If you hit any of the smaller enemies, they're frozen and then they will take more damage. You can also just clear them up with your pickaxe too if you need to. So the cryo grenades can also be a really nice grenade to have. Then you have the pheromone canisters as your third grenade. These ones act like the pheromone bolts from the crossbow, where you get 4 of them. You toss this out, it explodes, and it coats everything in pheromones. Everything that's hit by pheromones will try to attack each other, assuming that they are bugs. Robots won't try to attack one another if they are, well, robots fighting around the area. If you do tag a robot and there are bugs around, though, then they will try to attack that. This also slows down everything by a little bit when you hit them with the pheromones, which is kind of nice. And the pheromones have a 15-second duration. This is arguably like the strongest grenade if you're playing in the modded difficulties, where there's just such big hordes of enemies. You can toss this out and you can affect so many enemies. On lower difficulties, I don't think the pheromone grenades are all that overpowered, but they can be still really nice, especially against large crowds like on egg hunt missions. And they're really nice for picking up teammates too if you need to toss these out, since if all the bugs are attacking each other, then they're probably not focusing you. Although I have seen this kind of backfire if you hit like a Praetorian with it and it starts spitting and covering an area that it wasn't otherwise. So that can be a little bit of a danger, but most of the time it's really good. And then for your fourth grenade, you have the boomerang. You throw this out, you get 8 of these, so you get the most amount of these out of any grenade besides the impact axes for driller, which also come with 8. These ones have a very long stun duration. If you hit something with this, it stuns it for 8.5 seconds, so it takes forever for that thing to be unstunned. Deals a little bit of damage as well as puts electricity onto the enemy. The electricity is purely just a slowdown though. It doesn't actually really do much damage after that. And these boomerangs are just self-guided, so if you throw them out, they'll just go to the nearest enemy and then try to bounce to hit up to 9 other enemies. So you can stun a pretty good amount of enemies with this. This one's probably my favorite grenade for Scout, even though I would say it's also probably one of the weakest grenades, since on like modded difficulties it's not as good as the other ones. It's just really fun to watch though, and it's really cool that these ones are just no skill grenades. You can just throw them out. They also come back to you if there's no enemies in the area, so if you end up fat fingering your grenade button, you don't have to worry about that. Your boomerang will always just come right back to you, so that's pretty awesome. Assuming that there's not enemies nearby, then it will go after them. And this can be really good for clearing up small enemies like jellyfish and swarmers. It can also be pretty good for just stun locking grunts, especially if you want to res somebody. So all these grenades are really good. Scout has some of the best grenades in the game. They are all just utility grenades, and all of them are really, really nice. So finally, let's go over some perks for Scout, and the perks that I usually run. For the passive perks for Scout, I tend to run Resupplier as my main perk. This just makes it so I can get resupplies faster. It also counts as a mini born ready, so I can reload my gear. Really nice to have, and it's just super useful with your suit being maxed out if you have breathing room, since then you are guaranteed to get a resupply, assuming you don't get knocked away from it, usually multiple times during the duration. So I really love Resupplier for this. It's one of the best passive perks in the game. Born Ready is another one that I run, where it just reloads all of my gear. This counts for my primary weapon, secondary weapon, and my flare gun. it won't reload anything else, and it doesn't reload the track, since that one can't be reloaded. It doesn't affect its overheat, but it does affect everything else that Scout has, so it's really nice to have there. Then I'll usually go with something like Thorns or Vampire. Thorns is pretty good for just clearing up small enemies. Like if you have Swarmers attacking you, it'll just kill them, so you don't have to worry about them so much. And Vampire is really nice since Scout's pretty good at melee, so that you can get health back. It can also be really useful if you're running Iron Will. For active perks, I would recommend Iron Will and Field Medic for Scout. You don't necessarily need Dash, although I know a lot of Scouts really like Dash, so if you want to take it, by all means, it just gives you even more mobility, so that's really nice. But usually I go with Iron Will and Field Medic. Iron Will makes it so that once per game you can res yourself, and if you combine this with something like Vampire, you can pick yourself up if you kill something with that. It's also just really good for resetting the team and making it so that missions don't fail. And then Iron Will makes it so you can pick up teammates even faster, as well as once per game you can instantly res a teammate, which is really nice, especially when things get really hectic. If you combine both of these, it makes it so Scout can completely reset the team very easily. Even more so if you have like a gunner on your team, you go over and instantly res them, go over to somebody else, res them, go to the third person and maybe start resing them and then die. Gunner throws the shield down, they can probably pick up you, pick up the other person, your whole team is picked back up, and you're good to go again. And I wouldn't really recommend this build if you're playing solo, since Field Medic doesn't help in solo, and Iron Will kind of helps in solo, but you might want to go with other things like Berserker or Beastmaster or something like that for Scout. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I'd love to go through them. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody!